Hello, creatives, and welcome back to The Thriving Artist. This is the show where we discuss how you can create. Wow. Starting over. Hello, creatives, and welcome back. I'm your host, Adrienne Lauren, and this is The Thriving Artist, the show where we talk about how creatives can create a flourishing career. Our guest for today is a business consultant for fine artists. She helps other artists find a path towards financial comfort simply by embracing their passion. She believes that you can make a living from your art and is on a mission to eliminate the starving artist myth altogether. So without further ado, please welcome Laura C. George.
Hey everybody, I'm so excited.
Me too. I'm so excited to dig into this and really just talk about how creatives can bridge that gap between being an amateur and a professional. And when I say amateur, I don't mean that like they're bad at their craft. Like these are people that have devoted a lot of time and they've really worked hard on their craft, but they're just really struggling to now turn it into something they're really good at, that they're doing on the side, and into something that is either their full-time job, if that's what they want, or just a flourishing business, whatever their, however they choose to see success for themselves. So why don't we dig into that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a super big step. And I think a lot of artists that I've spoken with, they take it almost like it's not a big step. They just sort of start doing it like, oh, I'll just throw some things up somewhere and it'll be fine, right? I'll put them on Society 6 or Etsy or whatever, and I'll sell stuff and it'll be great, right? And like, because from a business perspective, it's a really big step to go from not selling whatever you make suddenly selling it, right? That's like a huge deal. And when you don't treat it that way, right, then it usually doesn't work. It's very rare that I see anyone who just kind of like throws some stuff up on one of those sorts of sites and just suddenly it all is working great and they're making lots of money because it hasn't got the thought process behind it and the strategies behind it. It's more of a Hail Mary of a sort. Like it's like, let me just let everything be taken care of by someone else, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the approach that I see, really, I'd say most artists and creators taking with their work these days with their first foray into having a business. And I'm here to say it's not going to work. And if you're doing that right now and you're struggling, that's normal. You should be struggling and you shouldn't expect that it's going to turn around or that you're doing anything wrong. Don't feel like you've done anything wrong at all. It's just something that over time will just pretty much stay the same. Might increase a little bit, but with what you're doing by just sticking things up there and hoping they'll sell, that's not going to be successful. What you really need to do is build a strategy for developing your own audience of people and marketing yourself, and then selling your work to the people who are already fans, right?
Yeah. So why don't we delve into that idea of building an audience? Because a lot of people, that's a piece that they don't know how to do. Like, how do we actually find these people that not only are fans of what you're doing, but are saying, hey, I love this so much that I want you to take my money, and they're happy to give you their money? How do artists find those people?
Yeah, it's tough, for sure. And I wouldn't say that it's something that you can just, it's like the same for everyone. And I could just say like, oh, just, Facebook's going to be your way to find people. It's not really that way, unfortunately, because that would make it so easy. It would be so wonderful. Everybody's a little bit different, but not because of you or your art. Sorry, my dog
just wants to join in the conversation.
Right? Hopefully she won't be too noisy. You really need to focus on your audience, because it's not really so much about you and your art as to where that's going to be best promoted. It's actually about the people who like your art and are likely to buy your art, and where they are going to be hanging out. That's where you're going to find your most success. So you want to start with thinking about, well, what types of people like my art? And you might not know, and sometimes it's easier to say, well, what types of people don't, right? If you paint florals, then probably people who shop at Hot Topic aren't really into your stuff, right? Like But you can
Unless there's skulls involved, maybe.
yeah, exactly. You can start to sort of put people aside as like, okay, these people don't fit, and then you get a better and better picture of who does. You know, it might not be perfect right away, but figuring out your target market is like the essential part of figuring out how you're going to do any marketing, and that's how you're going to build an audience who will buy your stuff. Because, like I said, normal people who have never seen you before are probably not going to buy your stuff. It's very, very unlikely. And that's just normal for art in general. But it's normal for a lot of product type things. If it's not a utilitarian object, you know, you're not buying a broom, you're not buying sugar at the grocery store, right? You're buying something that's a little bit more personal. And usually people don't buy the first time, you know, they kind of need to get to know the brand, you know, get to know, and you're the brand for your art business almost always. And so they want to get to know you, right? And so in that sense, you need to build your own audience. My favorite way that works for most artists is to do what's called public relations. PR, you might have heard of it. And essentially it's just having media talk about you, right? Having newspapers, magazines, blogs, right? Anything, podcasts. I've even seen like radio shows work for fine artists, which is like, what? How does that work? But I've seen it. It does. So any sort of media, and personally, I include influencer marketing in this, which is like a buzzy thing right now. People are really into influencer marketing. And that's because it's cool and it works. And that I kind of include in this whole idea, because you're basically borrowing someone else's audience. Someone else took the time to build up this huge group of people that are following them, and you're just going to say hi to their audience, and then some of them are going to come over to you and be your audience now, right? You're like borrowing, which is great. It's a shortcut, right? Instead of you having to build them one by one, being on social media or going out into the world, you know, or whatever, advertising even, and trying to pull in individual people at once, you can grab a whole market of people. And the trick is just to make sure that those people in that audience that you're showing to are very similar to the types of people that you think are going to buy your art, right? So you're matching the target market of the publication, you know, the magazine, the newspaper, the blog, whatever, and you're matching that audience, those readers, to who you think yours is.
Yeah.
And sometimes doing that is a good test to see if you're right, right? You know, it's easier to figure out who someone else's market is. It's less personal or something, so it's easier to figure it out. So you're like looking at the magazine and you're like, I know it's these people. And so if you test it, you have an article with them or whatever, and it doesn't work, and you don't get anybody coming over to you, then you know, oh wait, I'm wrong about who I thought my audience was, because it's not those people, right? And so it can be kind of helpful to kind of test back and forth. You get a theory about your market, then you go and get an article somewhere and you test it, right? And types of articles like can be all sorts of things, but most of the time with fine artists, at least, which is who I normally work with, like wall art, it's usually going to be a feature where it's like, here's a few pieces of your work, and here's a little paragraph about the artist, right? Or it's going to be an interview where it's like an in-depth like question and answer session with the artist, right? Those are the two most common types of public relations.
Cool. I have a follow-up question based on this topic. So if someone's like, okay, this is a great idea, I really want to give that a try, but I don't know how to get connected to these people, what are some recommendations?
That's a fabulous question. And I can say that you're not supposed to say that when you've got like a bunch of people asking questions, because it makes the other people feel bad. But I can say it's a fabulous question because you're the only one asking. No, it's great. Really, the most common way right now that tends to work really well is email. It's really standard that you would send an email to the person who is running that, right? The person, you're hoping that you find the person who makes the decisions. It can be really easy if it's like a blog. It's often one blogger, and you just have to email that one blogger or fill out their contact form or whatever. But if it's like a newspaper or a magazine, they might have like a huge staff list, and you're trying to figure out who makes the decision, right? And so sometimes it's like a writer who writes about that topic and consistently writes about that topic, right?
Yeah.
Consistently like an art writer and you think that you like their style of writing, then you might just reach straight out to them. But then there might be like an editor of a section, if you want to appear in like the arts and entertainment section of a newspaper, then, you would reach out to probably the editor, because that the editor's assigning different story ideas to their writers, right? So you reach out to one of them by email, and you want to write a really friendly pitch. People screw this up. It's called a pitch. I should say that. It's called a pitch when you reach out and you ask them, hey, do you want me to be in your publication, right?
Yeah.
And the mistake people make the most is that they write a really formal, really polite one. And you want to be polite, but you can be too polite. And when it's too polite, it feels really removed and businessy. And people think that that's good because they want to appear like professional, and they think that that's what's going to get the person to say yes because they look really professional. But it's actually the reverse. People want to feel connected to you, to feel like they like you in order to want to say yes. And so when you're creating that distance using formal, businessy kind of language, then it pulls the two of you apart and makes them be able to assess the situation from a very cool standpoint of just how can I say no kind of thing. And I really want to say no, right? How can I find a way to be able to tell this person no? And when you make it friendly, without losing, general grammar and spelling rules and everything, still be polite and still be professional, but try to be warm and friendly. And that brings you two closer, and they're going to feel like they like you, and that's going to make them want to say yes, right? And when they want to say yes, of course you have a better chance of getting the yes.
Yeah.
So you got to be careful with it, but you just reach out and you just say, hey, this is what I think would be a good fit. Would you be interested? Right.
Yeah.
Short is good. The shorter the email is in general, as long as it gets the point across, the better, because it looks really easy to read. And so they're more likely to read it rather than just leave their inbox or delete it or whatever.
Yeah. And I think when people have these platforms, these media platforms, right, we kind of forget that they're just people.
Yeah.
So just have a conversation with them, and
that's so true.
Yeah.
They are people on the other end, and they're people who their businesses aren't as fun as your burgeoning business at whatever stage you are in your business. Your business is more fun because it's creative, right? And their business, might be fun for them, but it's on a different scale, right? And so for them, there's a lot of in their inbox, it's a lot of, let me check this off the list, let me get this done. I've got people asking me for all these things, right? It can feel really overwhelming and tedious, right? And so when you break that rhythm for them of just get it done, check it off, then you're going to get a better response because you're making it feel fun.
Yeah. Awesome. So if we could break this down into practical action steps, what I'm receiving is, one, do some research on some platforms that you think your art would be a fit for, and then research their websites and try to find who the person to get connected to, and then reach out to them. And then
it's really simple. And just make sure when you're figuring out which ones to approach that there's a fit with the target market, right? The people who read their publication and the people who you think will buy your art. Just make sure that those are either a match or a really similar, so that there's some crossover and you're going to actually see results. Because if you get in front of the wrong people, you're just wasting your time and probably theirs too. And it's just going to be no one cares. Everyone's going to be I don't really like her art. So
and if you don't take the moment to do that, for them it's well, you really don't know our brand. So then it's kind of it turns you off of it, right? If you were the person that was receiving that. Awesome. Cool. I want to switch gears though. And I want to talk about when artists are trying to sell their work, what kind of guiding principles would you recommend when they're deciding what platform to go with? Because there's so much. There's Etsy, there's online, there's also galleries and maybe your own pop-up shop or, so
there's so many ways to sell art. And I think it's most important to really start again with who your audience is, because you're looking to appeal to them, right? You might have multiple audiences. I think this isn't talked about enough, that you might have lots of target markets,
Mm-hmm.
right? In a sense, a target market would be choosing one and targeting them. And that's what tends to work the best, but you might have lots of different potential ones that you could pick from, right? And so you might find that, like, oh, lots of people are going to like my art. It's still life or whatever. And like everyone likes that, or whatever it is. Right. And so, figure out what you're going to do first and pick a direction. You can always change it and go back, but pick a direction first. And then you can say, okay, well, those types of people, where are they, right? Where are they hanging out? And that's where you would market. And where are they shopping for art? And that's where you would want to be selling your stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe they're hanging out on parenting blogs, and maybe they're shopping on Etsy. That might be one target market, might do that. And so that's where you would want to be. You'd want to get featured or interviewed in the parenting blogs, and maybe even host giveaways on the parenting blogs. And then you'd want to be selling your products on Etsy, because that's where your people hang out. But most of the time, with most target markets these days, you're going to be better set to be doing your sales through your own website, or through in-person situations, right? If your target market is someone who shops online, it's going to be better for you if you have your own site with your own e-commerce situation. It could just be PayPal buttons. It doesn't even have to be complicated. You can set up a website probably for free, but even for like $200 a year, just paying for your host and then using like a free platform and some PayPal buttons, right? Like, it's really inexpensive if you want it to be. Or you can spend a bunch of money and get a really nice setup, or have someone do it for you or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Also scales, but don't be intimidated because, oh, a website's going to be expensive, I'm just going to go on Etsy because it's free, or I'm just going to put my work on Redbubble because it's free, right? Those things aren't going to do a lot of good for you, because they don't market for you. It feels like, well, I'm on the site with all these shoppers, but there's like millions of sellers.
Yeah.
Get lost in the sea. But then B, when people are on that site shopping, their attention is constantly pulled away to other people's shops, right? To other people's stuff. And so when you get a customer in the door of your Redbubble shop or your Zazzle shop or whatever, you're like all excited. They're in the door. They're looking at stuff, and then like 10 seconds later, they've gone somewhere else to look at something else, and you can't keep them, right? And so it's like all your marketing work is going to the good of Etsy or whatever, the good of your website provider, instead of your good. And that's not the best use of your time.
Yeah.
So build your own website, right?
Mm-hmm.
Use Big Cartel or Weebly or Squarespace if you want to spend a little money. Like, use
Wix,
something.
I think, also is out there.
I use WordPress still, which I still use the free version of WordPress. I don't have like, I think I've got maybe one or two plugins I pay for, little add-ons to make it run a little bit better. But in general, like, it's still free except for my domain name and storage on the server. It's called hosting.
Yeah.
And it works great, right? And a lot of people do that. Like, 7-figure businesses do that.
Yeah. So build your own online presence. So to dig a little bit deeper on that, like if someone was like, okay, I'm going to build my website, this sounds like a great idea. What are some really important elements that have to be on the site?
Make a way for people to buy. I see this like so often, that there's no way for people to buy, and they have to contact you. I should be more specific. Don't just make a way for people to buy. Make it easy way, right? Like make buttons where they can pay you. If people have to contact you to give you money, you're gonna make way less sales. You might make one or two, but it's gonna, like, I can't say you're not gonna make any sales. You might make some, but it's gonna be very rare, because that most people, that's a deterrent. They don't want to have to reach out to someone, especially when they're on the internet already. The internet feels like the place where you don't have to talk to people. And like all of our like all of our introvert sides, even for extroverted people, the introvert part of them comes out and is like, I don't want to do that. And like, what if I write in the email? And what if they tell me that it's expensive? You know, like people are always assuming that the price is going to be higher than it is. So just make a buy button. Just let people pay you right then and there. Some people will still contact you with a question, but most of the time, if they can just buy it, it's going to be better. I think the biggest, most important thing. But then I'd also say, like, have some information about yourself, because people really, especially when buying anything handmade, anything created by someone's hands, they want to know who the artist was. That's a big trend in the marketplace for the past 10 years-ish, and it's going to continue for another, well, I can't predict the future, but probably like 20 or 30 years. So you want to go ahead and have some information about who you are as a person, a photo of yourself, right? Like kind of let them get to know you. And then the last thing that I think is super important is an email opt-in form. You want to have some way for them to get onto a list where you have the email addresses, and then you can send them out messages. You might not want to do it just yet, though I would just jump in and do it as soon as you're ready, as soon as you want to. There's no time that's too soon. but even if you don't feel comfortable yet, at least start collecting those emails, because otherwise those people could just be gone forever, right? If they don't buy right then, they might just leave your site and forget about you and never find you ever again. And that would kind of suck, because right now you're doing all this work to market yourself, right? You're doing all these articles in blogs and magazines and stuff. And it would be really unfortunate if all of that website traffic, all those people coming to see you, just disappeared because you didn't have any way to collect them. You know, so just kind of collect their emails, let them tell you, yes, I want to hear from you. And then send them emails. And that's the best place to sell, right? So there's like stages. There's collecting your audience, getting new eyeballs. That's marketing, right? Then there's this bridge between marketing and selling. That's kind of like a get to know you phase, right? It's like and a lot of business people call it nurturing your audience, right? Getting to know them, or rather, they're getting to know you. You're not always getting to know them, but you could, make that a two-way street if you want. And then there's selling, but in the selling stage, you've got like the conversation around selling, and then the transaction. And the conversation around selling, like asking them to buy something and telling them about the product. Often part of that happens not on your sales page, like not on the page with the buy button. It often happens via email or on your social media posts or things like that. And then you link them back to the page where they can buy. And when they get over there, they might read a little bit more about the product, and then they press the buy button. So the transaction actually happens like on your website. But the selling, in a sense, the conversation, the choice about it, the like thinking through the process often happens at least partially beforehand.
Awesome. And then, so let's say they've got this platform, they've got everything going, and they're still going, why is nobody buying my art? And I think a big piece would be pricing. Am I pricing too high? Am I pricing too low? Like, there's like science to it, or like there's an art to it.
There's a method. So I have a method, and that's the freebie I wanted to give everyone for you guys. I have this video series on pricing art, and it's like my methodology. It's not the only way to do it. If you don't like it, do it this way, but it's my methodology that I find works really well and gives you prices that you can feel really confident in. You know? And it's basically like that. Like know what the marketplace is doing. Like know what other people are pricing their similar works at. Kind of get a sense for it. Know what your numbers are when you follow the formulas of like, what were my materials? What was my overhead for like, buying my new easel or the lights that power my studio or whatever, right? Like know those numbers and figure out like, okay, to break even, I've got to be here. To make a profit, I've got to be here, right? Like you want to know that stuff, but then you really want to think about, okay, well, with that in mind and what my target market thinks in mind, where can I find a number that is a good match, right? You certainly, like, you can't just follow these formulas and just say like, okay, well, now I have my number and that's it. You're going to always question whether it's the right number, whether your formula was right. And oftentimes it's not right. Sometimes too high even, but a lot of times it's too low.
Yeah.
And you'll find that you can price too low. A lot of people don't realize this. Everyone thinks that, well, the cheaper the art is, the better, right? Like if it's cheaper, someone's more likely to buy it. And that's actually not the case at all. Like people have, individual art customers have these ranges in their head of what art should cost. And the range could be wide. You know, it could be like, oh, art should cost $100 to $1,000. It's pretty wide. Or it could be really narrow. Like I only buy artwork in $200 to $300 range because I don't think, you know, art less than that is cheap and art higher than that is too expensive and it's a ripoff, right? Like different people have different mindsets about it, which may or may not be good, you know, but they just have their own thing. And you have to say, okay, well, what does my target market think, right? And if my target market thinks that, you know, $50 is too low to spend on art, then I need to raise that price. Even if I can make a profit at 50 is not enough because the target market won't buy it, right? They're not going to buy it. I think it's lower than what their range is for how they buy art because it's going to feel cheap. They're going to think it's not high quality.
That's
and no
so
one buy cheap art. Right?
Yeah, well, especially if they're the type of people that value art. Yeah,
right.
They're not going to buy cheap art.
And almost certainly your target market is going to be someone who values art. Like it's very unlikely that you're going to be selling art to people who don't value art. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
It's a hard sell.
You're probably going to pick a different market, right?
Yeah. And I'm sure we could go on and on and on. So I'm so grateful that you've put together this video lecture. So if people really want to dig in and if that's really something they really want to work on, then they can go
you
click
can
that
just
link.
put your email in and I'll send you the link to just watch them right away. And there's like, I don't know, like 10 or 15 videos. You can watch one, you can watch them later, you can watch them all in a binge. Like it's built that you can kind of do it however.
Amazing. So we are
right?
running out of time. So if you could give our viewers just like one takeaway, maybe it was a tip or a lesson you learned from a mentor, or maybe just something you learned in your journey that's made an impact.
I think the biggest thing to remember is to lead with things that you enjoy, because if you build a business that you hate, then there was kind of no point, right? You have done it in the first place.
So keep your happiness as your compass.
yeah. Build a business that you love, and then you'll be happy, right? Which is the whole point.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody wants to build a happy life and be able to do the things that they enjoy, minus the stress and really we want to declutter from the things that we don't want to be doing and just be able to focus on the things that we love. So
Absolutely.
I love it. I love that piece of advice. So thank you so much, Laura, for your time today. I really appreciate it. I learned a lot. I'm sure the viewers learned a lot. And if you want to learn more, please do check out her Art of Pricing video series. And yeah, I'm Adrienne Lauren. This is The Thriving Artist. We talk about how creatives can create a flourishing career. Thanks so much for your time. In the meanwhile, stay inspired, stay motivated, and stay on your grind, because the world needs that special something that only you have. Keep creating, and we are out of here. I hope you enjoyed that. Bye.